Hello and welcome back, everyone. Happy Thursday. Today we are going to be taking a look at Dev Diary number 114, which is going to be revealing some of the narrative content that is going to be featured in Sphere of Influence, which will be released on June 24th. And so let's jump in. This is going to be the conflict between both Russia and the UK over Central Asia. So let's get into it. Hello, this is Victoria, and today, well, I can't blame Victoria for not saying Happy Thursday, can I? It is her game, so, okay. This is Victoria. Today I will be covering much of the great game-themed narrative content, which is coming in Sphere of Influence. This will be the first Dev Diary covering narrative content, with the second covering Minor Nations, the great game, and other related content. They said this is probably coming next week, so that's going to be when that is, probably. Throughout the 19th century, Russia and Britain competed with one another for influence in Asia. This period of rivalry was colloquially known as the Great Game, beginning in the Caucasus and Central Asia and expanding over time to include the struggles for influence in areas as far away as Korea and China. Makes a lot of sense. UK had their finger in everyone's pie, and Russia is adjacent to Asia. Technically, Russia's in Asia, or part of Russia, but let's continue. Not like most of where the population is, though. Okay, the new Great Game is objectives diverge from more sandbox-oriented objectives by serving as a guided tour of this period in history. While most of the content involved in the Great Game is available to owners of Sphere of Influence during every playthrough, the Great Game objective contains objective sub-goals designed to guide the player through the content and represent the progress of the Great Game as a whole. Fantastic. To ensure the best experience, the Great Game objective is only available for the 6 historical participants specified below: Russia, Persia, Britain, Kabul, Herat, and Kandahar. And so we can see here, you can start with the Great Game objectives, in addition to kind of the old one, economic dominance, hegemony, egalitarian society, and now we have the Great Game. Now, to be fair, I haven't done these objectives in quite some time, and when I did them, it was like patch 1.1, and they were bugged, and so I've since stopped trying to do these objectives. Maybe we should jump in and do one of these again. We will almost certainly be doing one for the Great Game pretty soon on 1.7, and so this will be, we will either do Russia or Great Britain, probably. Maybe we'll take a little bit of a vote, but the flavor is the new century marks the beginning of a long conflicted waged across the world's largest continent through intrigue. The new century marks the beginning of a long conflict. Oh, I just was adding an ED at the end of conflict. I apologize. Waged across the world's largest continent through intrigue, warfare, and deft diplomacy. Guide Russia and Britain to dominate Asia or lead Afghanistan or Persia to the path to sovereignty. So you could do Persia, or you could unite Afghanistan as Kabul, Herat, or Kandahar. Okay. Upon launching the Great Game, the first thing you will see is a list of objective sub-goals, along with the sub-goal which represents the core of the Great Game. The Great Game objective mixes country-specific and generic objectives. Whilst both Britain and Russia have the objective of securing influence over Persia or creating an Afghan protectorate, they also have country-specific objectives, which will be covered later in the diary. And you can see there's a little bit of a struggle, what is this, UI thing, which I think is pretty neat. And also objectives which share the same icon, which are going to be good for the Great Game. The Great Game core sub-goal is where progress of each nation of the game is tracked. So I think that's this. Completing each sub-goal will benefit the nation that completes it, pushing the bar to the right or the left. The bar will drift, Tokyo Drift, in one direction or another each year, according to the differences in national prestige and market GDP. So if you have a really big market, it will help, which I am assuming will kind of give the UK a leg up in a normal state of affairs, but Russia might have more objectives that are more easily completable, and if this is the case, they'll have some ways to rake back influence. I don't really know who it favors at game start here, based on reading these. As we can see here, there are 3 currently unopened questions in the Great Game: the fate of the Caucasus states, the struggle over Afghanistan and Persia. These are victories to be had. Both Britain and Russia have made advances before the game start, with Britain benefiting from their successful expedition through the Hindu Kush into Bukhara in 1831, and Russia benefiting from enforcing the Treaty of Turkmenistan in 1828. In the Great Game, victories represent conflicts within which both powers vie against each other, and their advances represent more technical, military, or diplomatic achievements. Now, while all this Great Game is occurring, I hope that there's some sort of systems that make it so that, you know, not engaging in a super hot war is maybe going to be good. I don't really know what will happen. We can see, that makes it harder to read, that's true. We can see that, I hope that allow me to rephrase. I hope that engaging with the content in kind of the flavor or narrative way that it's supposed to be engaged in will be superior from a gameplay perspective in terms of rewarding the player than just playing as the UK and be like, you know what, I'm just going to release Ukraine from Russia and just watch them implode, or this type of thing. Like, that is to say that engaging in the Great Game will be better than engaging in direct war or conflict, unless it's part of the Great Game. Okay, so progress towards the left or left of the bar will benefit Great Britain. Progress to the right benefits Russia. Let's see, generic term for conflicts between Russia, Central Asia, etc., etc. We see the victories: Caucasian War inconclusive, Afghan and Protectorate inconclusive, influence over Persia inconclusive, advances Russia enforced. These are the ones they talked about being present at the start, and will complete if the Great Game has contributed with every country in the Caucasus, Central Asia, or etc., etc., as a subject or power block member of either Russia or Great Britain. So if you subjugate everyone, you win. Either player drops below GP, they lose. If completed, the outcome of the Great Game will depend on the balance of the progress bar, triggers the event stalemate, and so you can either stalemate or win or lose. I think they said the reward was like prestige or something else, but prestige also seems more meaningfully useful with some of the new mechanics they're introducing in this patch, so we'll see how that goes. Right now, prestige isn't too useful, and so let's see. When the journal entry concludes, the position of the bar will determine whether or not the Great Game has a victor, or whether neither power was able to gain supremacy. The power that wins the Great Game will receive a prestige and power block cohesion bonus, and the nation defeated will be humiliated in the eyes of the world. So the prestige bonus allows you to keep better control of your block, but the cohesion bonus also will, so maybe this allows you to, you know, kind of expand your block more than it normally would, and this is a really strong reward. We see kind of, events for this, the Great Triumph, where our victory has brought Russia to glory and Great Britain got humiliated. We don't see what modifiers we're getting here, but we do see some nice art, which I think this is new art, which is super cool, big like, big nice. And then we see the Great Defeat, which is the reverse, again, new art. We see Sphere of Influence tag at the bottom. Decisive British victories across the field of the Great Game have caused Russia immense humiliation on the world stage. The conflict is over and has ended with our defeat. Alright. Of course, the Great Game does not always have a winner. Contrary to the views of the imperial administrators vying over the territories of Central Asia, the people who reside there have agendas that are own. If, while playing as a Central Asian or Persian power, for which we are not covering the flavor today, really, or one punishes both Britain and Russia or one pushes both Britain and Russia out of the region, the Great Game will be forced to close with the great powers being humbled. And so, if you are planning on doing any sort of Central Asia run, I would highly recommend waiting until... Oh, did they get rid of... Where's the Sikh Empire? Bruh. Is the Sikh Empire just gone? What happened? What happened? Okay, well I guess that's a question for another time. This is at the end of the... Okay, they're going to talk about Afghanistan a little bit. This is at the end of that, so I assume Sikh Empire just got annexed, but is still present on Game Start. Yikes. Well, both... Oh, they are going to cover some generic content. So I think this is generic content for everyone, maybe? But they did say they were going to talk about the smaller countries at a later date. Okay, but let's jump into this now. While Britain and Russia have their unique national priorities, the core of the Great Game lies in the battle for the leverage over Central Asia, as both powers have generic sub-goals for acquiring influence in the region. I wonder what's going to prevent people from... I wonder if the Great Game journal entry will just prevent you from declaring outright war, or if there are ways to get subjugation of all these Central Asian guys without any infamy, and that this is a preferable way of doing it. I hope that one of the two is true, and that just subjugating Persia is not like the opener for Russia or Great Britain. But okay, let's see. In Afghanistan, for example, one may establish protectorate over all the nations in the region, but the process does not stop there. The power which successfully establishes a protectorate over Afghanistan must keep it for 10 years without any Afghan states slipping out of their grasp. And so, I think that... okay, so someone else has to subjugate them, and then they will turn into Afghanistan. With some national border kind of resolutions. I'm not sure exactly how this is going to play out, because it's not super clear reading through the dev diary once already, but let's continue reading into it. At game start, Afghanistan's borders are quite different from what they were at the end of the period. This is owed to the Anglo-Russian Agreement of 1895, in which Russia and Britain jointly decided upon the borders of Afghanistan state, or the Afghan state. That sucks for the non-colonizers. Once Afghanistan unites, a journal entry modeling this will appear for both Britain and Russia, along with the objective sub-goal for those playing the great game. So we see consolidate Afghanistan, and so the borders have not yet been internationally recognized, and they will get some movement, or there will be some diplomatic pushing and jockeying, supposedly 4 different borders, and they will show us a bunch of different borders, but let's get to that. The Palmyra delimitation journal entry represents the negotiations between Russia and Britain to determine the borders of Afghanistan. Depending on the borders of Afghanistan at the beginning of the process, the journal entry will present a variety of different proposals permitting the great powers to grant or claim a varying amount of land. See, here, Britain has decided that Afghanistan's southeastern border should be drawn along the Indus River, while Russia has decided upon giving some of its territory in the north. And I'm wondering what is going to incentivize you to give up territory, or just any territory at all. Well, obviously, the UK is not giving up theirs, they're giving up the EICs here, but we could see... Russian proposals, they can abandon all their claims. The northern border will be drawn along the river. No proposal for southeastern Afghanistan. Afghanistan will abandon all of its claims outside of its recognized borders, so this is the incentive for other countries, is to eliminate Afghanistan's claims, but if you're Russia, you're not scared of Afghanistan, so, okay. If completed, you will see the resolution will include the shuffling of all of the estates that were part of the claims. Again, I don't know what's going to incentivize the players or the AI from not just claiming the maximum, but maybe there will be some stuff. Once the great powers have agreed to a treaty, it is presented to Afghanistan, which has the option to accept or refuse. If Afghanistan refuses, the great powers will need to do another round of negotiation, this time with additional coercive measures available to them. So maybe you can peel kind of some states off of Afghanistan. If you guys both agree between Russia and the UK, you can peel states off of Afghanistan, maybe for less infamy than you otherwise would be able to. And this is the incentive for you to do it this way rather than like militarily and this type of thing. We have this option. We have no choice but to accept. We don't see what stick they are that is being waved at them. What is the penalty for objecting in this case? But here we see Afghanistan rejected the proposal, rejects proposed agreement, and this is coming back to the players. So we're not seeing any specific modifiers, which, to be fair, they're probably working on the balance, and so they don't want to show us. So that makes sense. We could see request of all of this stuff and offer compensation and threaten reprisals. And so I guess this will be the means by which you do this. If Afghanistan continues to refuse the great powers, or the great powers fail to come to a deal, negotiations will break down and the overlapping claims will almost guarantee future wars in the region. So maybe the good main idea is you just prevent wars, and you can see below, pictured, some of the shapes that post Palmyra delimitation, whatever Afghanistan might take. Some of these may provide more viable than others, prove more viable than others. If you're Afghanistan, you of course will want pretty much more than anything some coastal access. Access to the coast is really important, and so I think there's maybe one coal/iron state in here. I forget exactly where they are, but okay. So we will have some Afghanistan stuff. Sounds good. Alright, let's scroll down. Now, Persia, I thought they weren't going to cover too much of the... Okay. The requirements for successfully completing the sub-goal to secure influence over Persia is similar to Afghanistan. Okay, this is from the perspective of kind of the great powers. I think this is also the perspective of the great powers. With the caveat that the territorial integrity of Persia must be maintained, at least to some extent. That's an interesting one. So you have to not take territory from them? Makes sense. The fluid borders and expansionist ambitions over Persia, which will be shown in more detail next week, mean that Persia may take many shapes over the course of the game. Okay, maybe not. So we can see securing influence over Persia. We maintain our subject relationship or control all of various territories, it looks like. Also, several other ones. Hormuz. All right. And if you complete it, you get a shift towards Russia, and it will fail automatically if Persia is recognized. We see the Himalayan exploration, and to be honest, I don't use the exploration journal entries like very much, if at all, except as the USA, because you need to map the USA in order to get free land. So we do a little bit as the USA, but other than that, I've had too many guys banished to Shadow Realm. All it gives you is prestige. However, prestige is shaping up to be more useful than it has been in previous patches. So let's jump into this real quick. Throughout the late 19th centuries, European explorers constantly attempted to penetrate through the Himalayan mountains to challenge the Tibetan Plateau and determine the best routes for military expedition into the interior of China. Sphere of Influence adds an expedition into the Himalayas with ramifications for the Great Game if successfully completed. So we see expedition to Tibet, and then this is just an expedition. While your explorers survey the roof of the world, that's certainly a name for it. They may come across many things, from mountains being higher than anything they've seen before, or fascinating wildlife. Here we have an event, something about getting wounded, and Home Counties gets a fluffy zoo exhibit for 5 years with plus 50% migration attraction. This is actually a type of modifier that I don't think we've seen before in these types of things, or maybe I just haven't done enough of them. But that is actually a decent modifier to achieve. Yeah, okay, so maybe these things are more worth doing. In addition to the risk of losing life or limb to frostbite or the wildlife's claws, any European expeditions trespassing into the region will run the risk of causing diplomatic incidents with China. So I'm guessing you accrue infamy, which is no good. It's best to tread cautiously, lest the expedition be sent back humiliated or not come back at all. We see blah blah blah, making its ways to the capital, incursions into Tibet. There's a trifle, issue a protest to Great Britain's embassy. So this is from event in Beijing. This is from Qing's perspective. This is unacceptable. Send reinforcements to Lhasa and tell them they have our support. So you can eject them, which is going to maybe make it so you want to have positive relations. We'll see. Country-specific content. In the Great Game objective, the majority of the objects are country-specific. So you're racing to accomplish your objectives before they accomplish theirs. In many cases, these objectives are linked to journal entries that are available for the country, for a country in any playthrough, with the objectives serving as a way to point out specific journal entries and grant players points in the Great Game for completing them. We have the Caucasian War, which is going to operate from Russia's perspective. UK, obviously, you're trying to stifle that. For example, in Russia, the Secure the Persian Border objective is tied to a new journal entry that's available for Russia at game start, which is a Secure the Persian Border. You have to secure the Caucasus, which is the region... here, we'll just scroll down. The Caucasian War is a conflict that's been raging for some time at the beginning of the game, beginning with Russian attempt to annex Circassia in the mid-18th century. In 1836, the Caucasian Imate and Circassia continued to resist the Russian domination of the region, making much of the region effectively ungovernable. Russia control of the South Caucasus is exerted primarily through the Georgian military highway, a route that is constantly threatened by unrest in the North Caucasus. If Russia loses control of the North Caucasus, it is certain to lead to the loss of the South as well. Okay. So we have the Caucasian War, and you have to secure Kuban, Dagestan, and the North Caucasus. And if completed, you will get the Imate's Fail and Fall of Circassia, and then It doesn't tell you how much great game progress you get here, but let's continue. While the Caucasian War journal entry is active, events will intermittently fire, covering various situations related to the war. These options and these events often increase the devastation of the region, which is bad, of course, which will make things more difficult for the Inmate and Circassia at the cost of spilling into Russian-controlled regions as well. So you will want to just annex them as quickly as possible. However, I think later in the dev diary, they're going to tell us that you can't actually declare open war against these guys, and so it has this little bit of a feel of an insurgency from the Russia perspective, which I think is pretty neat. We do see several events that are, you know, kind of popping up, all with what looks like kind of newish art. I don't think this art's new, but this art I think is new, right? This art's definitely not new. Okay. One with new art. I take it all back. Once Russia has either successfully researched certain technologies or reached the end of its starting truce, okay, so it's a starting truce, the war may be escalated into a full-scale conflict, which permits the ordinary use of diplomatic plays against these nations. So you're going to have incentive in order to stop these events, which I'm assuming will just generally be bad for you. You're going to have incentive to integrate the Caucasus a little bit faster as Russia. Upon escalating the war, the Russian armed forces in the Caucasus will present the historical Milutian memorandum to the government. Accepting this memorandum will please the command of the armed forces, but lead to the historical outcome of the Caucasian War, the devastation of the region, depopulation, and forcible explosion into, or forcible expulsion of much of the Circassian population of the Ottoman Empire. Yay! So obviously you don't want to lose pops, so maybe you don't do this, but we'll see. Here's the memorandum. We can choose endorse and the other thing, but of course they are not going to reveal to us what modifiers, because they're still balancing this. Circassia and Caucasian Inmate also have content related to the conflict, which will be shown in the next dev diary. That'll be interesting if these countries is more playable, if these countries are more playable, rather. I know there's one of those countries is completely surrounded by Russia, and I think is probably one of the hardest starts in the game. So if they somehow make that country playable, that might be a bit interesting. The rest of the Caucasian War requires the Sphere of Influence DLC, but the content pertaining to the whatever memorandum and the brutal depopulation of the Caucasus is not. While this is a gruesome event in history, it is not something which in good conscience can be overlooked. So, okay, that will be available to everyone, rather than just the DLC users, handsome as they are. So next we have Kazakhstan. As of 1836, the Kazakh steppes have been under the Russian Empire for several decades. The power of the Khan has been recently abolished, and the Kazakh Zhuzh, placed under the command of various Russian-appointed Aga Sultans. Wow, so many words I don't know. However, this system of administration is beginning to fray. Early in the game, Russia will receive an event notifying them that the rise of Kenosari Kasumuli, a Kazakh aristocrat who has come to spearhead Kazakh resistance against Russian rule, and we will see his ride begins. And so this was, I guess, the start of the journal entry. Cossack escorted caravan moving across the steppes has been assaulted by a large and well-trained band of Cossack rebels led by this dude. Okay. So I think there will be more flavor for you to play as, you know, countries in this region to kind of unify and do this type of thing, but we'll see in just a moment. I wonder if they'll give it the treatment to this guy. The treatment being, of course, there's currently only one person in the game who gets this huge military bonus, if I recall correctly, and that is Big Daddy Tuodros of Ethiopia. And if this guy gets a military bonus, then these guys might actually be super interesting to play, in that you, like, the military bonus is just so strong. Like, Tuodros gets, like, 20 base, offense. So on offense, he turns, like, irregulars into, like, squad infantry, basically. Just on offense only. And so if there was something like this for this guy, then playing as one of these countries actually would be a little bit interesting. Also, it would be very difficult for, or it would be frustrating, or, well, maybe it'll be too frustrating for Russia to fight if they give a bonus like that. But they might do that. We'll see. When this event occurs, a new unresolved victory appears in the Great Game sub-goals. So now there will be a new sub-goal where it includes the Kazakh revolt. Remember before, we only had 3, the Caucasian War, the Afghan Protectorate, influenced Persia, now there's another one. And a new sub-goal along with its corresponding journal entry appears. Pacify the Kazakh steppe, and so this will require you kind of completing this thing, and we'll shift it 10 towards Russia, and then if the Kazakh revolt is successful, 25 towards Great Britain. So that'll be something that is interesting. The pacification of the steppes journal entry is completed by slowly and peacefully annexing the Kazakh protectorates. Well, that is an important piece of information here. So first of all, the guy might get a military. Well, let's put aside the military bonus thing for a second and focus on why this is significant. Peacefully annexing is not something you can currently do in game. This might be introduced with Sphere of Influence. Not 100% sure. If there's a way to peacefully annex, then this might change the metagame quite a bit, because currently you look at everything from infamy as a resource type of perspective, and you use infamy to annex. If you can peacefully annex in some way, then suddenly this changes the game quite a bit. But okay, this peacefully annexing is a very interesting tease. I hope that you can peacefully annex people, but it's just difficult. And if this is what you have to do with the Kazakh protectorates, then this will be, kind of a bit of an interesting thing, especially because there are events that increase their liberty desire, it seems. And fails if the Kazakh protector's liberty desire is too high, or if 10 years passes without successfully achieving the goal. Okay, pacification of the steppes will complete if we own all this, and will fail if the liberty desire of all these countries gets too high, and it triggers the Kazakh revolt. While the journal's entry is active, events pertaining to the rebels will fire, possibly interfering with the liberty desire of Russian Kazakh subjects. Makes sense. Here's one of these such events where they actually show us the modifiers. Plus trade route bureaucracy cost in Oligopoly. Or Oligopoly gets, okay, just them get this. Minus infrastructure increases liberty desire by 15. So that's a pretty negative modifier for them. In addition to firing events for Russia, Canal will also fire events for the Kazakh Jews and the Central Asian Khanates, giving them the chance to side with Canal when he eventually launches his final play for the control of Kazakhstan. So it will be very interesting. We will be aligned with the Canal Khan in military matters against Russia. It will be very interesting if he gets his own modifiers. If Russian rule is significantly disputed, the liberty desire reaches too high a value, he will seize control of Oligopoly and launch an independence war against Russia, along with allies he's collected along the way. And so we'll see this event, rally the loyal sultans, and then the Kazakh people will never submit to the invaders. And then we see the last Kazakh Khan. There's so many K's in here. Proclaimed the last representative of the 3 Zhuzhas to be the Khan of the reunified Kazakh Khanate, Canasari Kasimuli, has openly risen up against Russia in order to secure the Kazakhs' territories once and for all. The Khanate must be destroyed. And so, we'll see. If they give some sort of special military modifier, especially on defense, then you probably can beat Russia. Otherwise, it seems like it would be impossible, but we'll see, I guess. If Russia can successfully crush this revolt, then they will gain progress in the Great Game. But it has far more to lose than gain. While Great Britain is not necessarily aiding Canal, his victory will represent a coup for Britain, and as Russia now has much more work to do to reach Afghanistan, and we see the huge Khanate, and of course. This is kind of preventing any sort of ingress into Afghanistan, and we see the Great Game shift 25 towards the UK as the result of this, and so we shall see. If Russia succeeds, it will have an opportunity to menace the other Central Asian Khanates, and upon researching civilizing mission, unlock a new journal entry, the conquest of Turkestan, which I think is Turkmenistan here. We'll see. The Silent Steppes, with the pacification of the rebel Khanate and the execution of the Canal Khan, the Russian state may now uncontestedly project power through the entirety of the Kazakh lands. Woo! And then we must drive further east, further into Turkestan. And so we get conquest of Turkestan, and it's going to be yeah, we want to take all of this or the subject and trigger stuff for the Great Game. Other Russian sub-goals. Throughout the course of the game, Russia will periodically unlock sub-goals that will advance its position in the Great Game. These sub-goals represent various historical aims of Russia and are exclusive to the Great Game objective. Exclusive to the Great Game objective, so this means you do have to start the game with the Great Game objective. You can't just start with sandbox mode. If I'm reading this correctly. The codified Chinese border sub-goal represents the Russian Empire's desire for various territorial concessions in Central Asia and Outer Manchuria, signed away by Qing Empire in the mid-19th century. The acquisition of Outer Manchuria was instrumental in the ability of Russian Empire to project its power into the Pacific Ocean. One thing that I've seen modded that I think is probably a good thing is that the super far north areas in terms of ports can't build as many ports because warm weather port versus places that get landlocked in the winter effectively because too much ice or ice locked, I guess, in terms of the ports. Anyways, that's a little bit of a digression, but that's why just having some coast isn't good enough. You need to have some coast that doesn't freeze over in the winter. A situation which eventually led to British concerns over the integrity of the Pacific colonies and later alliance with Japan. To complete this sub-goal, Russia must both acquire the territories from China and force China to abandon its claim on the territories. If a non-player Chinese has been weakened by the Opium Wars and other calamities, the option to sign the Treaty of Ajin, Beijing Treaty, and Shuguchak Protocol provided by the ruler of the East journal entry are a perfect way to see this through while minimizing both the risk of war and the negative implications of a revanchist China on the border. Okay. So we see codify the Chinese border, and he's going to look to gain a whole bunch of little provinces or finish out the provinces, which this is often something Russia in terms of AI wants to do anyways, because there's a bunch of split states. The acquire Manchurian concession sub-goal relates to the relations between China and Russia and is triggered by the Russian acquisition and incorporation of a state in Outer Manchuria. This sub-goal encourages Russia to acquire a treaty port in Manchuria and to construct the historical Chinese Eastern Railway, which served as the further eastern branch of the Trans-Siberian Railway until the opening of the Amur River line in 1916. And so, this is going to give you some stuff if you have a treaty port in Manchuria, and if I read this correctly, it allows you to buy Manchuria or something like this by just first acquiring a treaty port. I wonder if there's a way to diplomatically gain treaty ports as a result of spheres of influence type stuff. Hopefully there is. That'd be kind of neat. With Russian acquisition of Outer Manchuria also comes ambitions to secure protectorate over Korea. Korea was considered to present a risk in the hands of a foreign power as a staging point for the decapitation of Russia's far eastern naval assets. Historically, the Russian Empire contended diplomatically with Japan for influence in Korea following the First Sino-Japanese War, which would meet at its climax with a Japanese-sponsored coup, killing the Queen of Korea and forcing the king to flee to the Russian embassy. Ugh. The period of heightened tensions between a modernizing Empire of Japan and Russia would cool for a brief period with the establishment of several agreements that would establish a balance of power in Korea. These agreements would come to an end following the Russo-Japanese War and later the Japanese conquest of Korea. That really does sound like coming to an end. The secure Korean protectorate sub-goal represents an alternate route, so alt history, the ambitions of both Nicholas II and factions within his government to establish a full Russian control of Korea. So we do see a little thing of, subjugating them, which will help you to win the Great Game. We see the shift towards Russia, plus 25 here. British sub-goals. In 1830s, British citizens and ships played a role in assisting Circassia against Russia. While Britain was historically unwilling to escalate its involvement in Circassia beyond additional shipments of weapons or volunteers dispatched by private citizens, it considered exerting its influence in the Black Sea to be in its national interest. This to me implies that you can intervene, and I can't imagine, or they haven't mentioned any mechanic that would prevent it, but you could just intervene and prevent them from annexing it, which would be kind of an interesting way to go about things. But if all you care about is winning the great game, it's probably worth it. The disruptive Russian Caucasus sub-goal represents the various initiatives amongst the British civil and political society to assist Circassia and react to what they saw the Russian threat of taking control of the Ottoman Empire if they could consolidate its territories in the Caucasus. And so we see we'll shift towards Great Britain by 15 if all of Kuban is owned by Circassia. So if you assist Circassia in getting Kuban. So maybe this makes Circassia playable as well if the UK will consistently assist you in a war. The Expand British India sub-goal represents a desire to expand the territories controlled by the East India Company into Burma and modern-day Pakistan. A strong East India Company or British Raj may serve as a valuable counterweight to Russian influence in the region and the center from which the Britain may project power into the remainder of Asia. And so here we have to get Delhi from Punjab. Let's see. We'll complete if all the countries in North India, or do they... Does Punjab? No, Punjab has Punjab, not Delhi. Or the Sikh Empire has Punjab. All counties in North India and South India's strategic region are subject to Great Britain as subjects, so this means going after the Sikh Empire, which is probably going to be harder to play as a result of, journal entries pertaining to them, and also Sindh. And then all states in Burma, Kachin, and Pegu strategic regions are controlled by Great Britain and are its subjects. Trying to remember how big Burma is, or if there's a Southeast Asia. All states in Burma, Kachin, and Pegu state regions. Okay, so it's just the state regions are controlled by, so you have to just go into Burma, not all of Southeast Asia. And this will shift the Great Game balance towards Great Britain by 10 points. Really love the flavor that's going to be, kind of encouraging you for going a particular route that is historic because... anything is incentivizing the player to not do kind of the standard go after South Africa every run thing, I think is probably a good thing. The contest between the Russian Pamirs sub-goal represents an abortive attempt in 1902 by Britain to seize control of the Pamir Mountains and establish an independent buffer state through a deeply unsubtle method, direct military incursion and cooperation with Afghanistan. While this proposition was historically rejected by the British government before materializing, the acquisition of Tajikistan by Russia will present Britain the opportunity to launch the proposed invasion. If Britain can manage to seize Tajikistan or establish a new Tajik state in its power block, it will gain a decisive advantage in the Great Game. Ooh, that's interesting. So we make a country in order to resist. Is that country going in the empty space that's uncolonized? In Turkmenia here? Maybe. Okay. That'll be neat. But we see conquest of the Russian Pamirs. They have to not control the state region. They have to not have subjects control the state region, and UK needs to have a subject controlling the state region. We'll shift towards Great Britain by 50 points. That was a lot of points, but at this point, Russia's already made progress as well. So, but yeah, that's a lot. Okay. The final unique sub-goal for Britain is to counter Russian Pacific influence. This represents a historical Anglo-Japanese alliance of 1902, which was formed in reaction to the strengthening Russian presence in the Far Eastern territories. This sub-goal is triggered. Remember that you start off with, I think, the 3 sub-goals, and new sub-goals get triggered by Russia developing its naval bases in outer Manchuria, heralding an incoming threat to the British fleet in the Pacific. If you prevent them from getting control of Manchuria, you'll never get this, but we see here... let's see. Any diplomatically relevant country, rank is greater than or equal to unrecognized major powers, is in at least one of these regions, and is at least one of these an alliance, defense pact, or in the same power block as Great Britain. So subjugating Japan would do the trick. Subjugating Manchuria, if they get strong enough, will do the trick. North China, South China, Indonesia, any of these will do the trick. And that's the Dev Diary. Next week, I will say Happy Thursday to you instead of not saying Happy Thursday, because that's what we're supposed to do. Next week, I will cover the content for the minor nations involved in the Great Game. I assume this is going to mean more stuff for Persia and this type of stuff, as well as how sandbox mode works with the new content. Remember, you have to start the game in Great Game mode rather than sandbox mode or with the Great Game Objective. If you start it without the Great Game Objective, you will not necessarily unlock all this stuff. So at the start of the game, instead of clicking sandbox, you have to click this and you have to select Russia, Great Britain, Persia, etc., mostly etc. But all very exciting. Love to see some more flavor. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please feel free to click the like, comment, subscribe button. It does help out. And the notification bell. Big nice. And other than that, have a rest of your happy Thursday. Or have a happy rest of your Thursday. That's the one. Have a happy rest of your happy Thursday.